Welcome, everyone, to episode 86 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan Anderson, coming to you from the continent of California. We have finally reached November, 86 episodes of the podcast. This used to be a one-man podcast. It wasn't very good, so I brought in two of my best friends. Get well soon, Marcus. What's going on, Ricky? We did that for a little while. We talked about all things sports and social issues. Life gets in the way sometimes, as you do when you got a bunch of guys in their 30s. So I decided to bring it back to a one-person podcast to where I talk to people that I find interesting about topics that I find interesting. Generally, shows are going to run either with a heavy WWE slant, Sacramento Kings, pro wrestling, Philadelphia Eagles. Those are the things that interest me. Again, my name is Ryan. You can check out all episodes of the podcast by subscribing on iTunes at Gully Blanchard Podcast, GULLYBLANCHARD. They're also available on pretty much anywhere you get podcasts: Stitcher, Google Play, obviously Apple iTunes, Spotify. Wherever you can get a podcast is where we're going to be. You can also check it out at nocoastbias.com. Shout out to Derek. Thank you for letting me have a space to write my wrestling stuff and also house this podcast. So this week is going to be pretty much the same as we like to do a lot of other weeks, where we talked about things that I find to be pretty interesting. My guest this week is a guy who does a lot of work with my hometown Sacramento Kings. He was the host of the Deuce and Mo podcast, also All Things Kings, and now he is the voice of the Stockton Kings. Deuce Mason, welcome to the show.
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. So where can people check you out on Twitter? What kind of things do you have going on now as far as with the Kings and the overall media?
It's nonstop, man. They can find me on Twitter at Deuce Mason. We just brought back the Deuce and Mo podcast last week. We're actually taping a new episode later tonight, so check it out. You'll find it on Apple Podcasts, pretty much everywhere you can podcast, Spotify, everywhere. And so I'm doing that, working on the Kings radio broadcast, and then adding a Stockton Kings play-by-play gig to it. So it's been a busy time, but a fun time.
Cool, man. So I know the Stockton Kings just had their first game. How was that as someone who grew up a sports fan, kind of getting behind the microphone covering that first Stockton Kings game? What was that like for you?
It was a surreal experience, to be honest, because I'm born and raised in Sacramento, and during my formative years as a youngster, I'm watching the Kings in their heyday. You know what I mean? And I was obsessed with sports. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. I wanted to be in sports radio. Like, I would sit in front of the TV, muted, and have a tape recorder out and tape myself calling games. So it's always been something I've been interested in. I just haven't done it at any type of high level. I've just been doing it on my couch. And so getting that opportunity to do play-by-play and then actually have that chance to do it for the Stockton Kings was a crazy just opportunity. Super nervous to going into it. And that first game, man, I felt like I was on a high for like the next 10 hours, man. I just felt it was probably, and I've done a lot of cool stuff in my career. Like I've worked on fun radio shows in San Francisco, Sacramento. I've done TV. I've been in a lot of cool events, but like literally this was probably the most fun thing I've ever done in my professional career. And that's called a basketball game. It was so fun, man.
Yeah, I know one thing when they announced they were changing from the Bighorns to the Stockton Kings, I was really excited because it sort of lent to the feel of I don't want to call the Stockton Kings a minor league team, but because they're a feeder system to the Kings that they are. But it's cool to have both of those teams within a close proximity to each other, and having the Kings in Stockton. I know they're doing a lot of work in Stockton to help revitalize the city's image with the Heat and the Ports, and now adding the Stockton Kings. I think it's really interesting that's going to be a fun place, a fun atmosphere to go watch a game. I know I'll be there Sunday afternoon when they play the Agua Caliente Clippers.
Oh, the Agua Caliente Clippers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy. Like, honestly, that to your point, it's great that sports brings people together. I think it's great that Stockton has a team now that's close to Sacramento too for these players. And honestly, the G League, the way it's evolved over the last 5 years is just crazy, man. I mean, it used to be kind of a joke thing, but there's these teams are using it a lot. You're seeing a lot of these teams send their rookies down just to get experience. Oh, you got an off day, you're not playing a lot. We're gonna go ahead and send you down. The Lakers did it recently with Mo Wagner. There's been other examples too. The Clippers sent their first round pick down just to go play in a game to get that experience. So you're seeing that, and you're seeing some guys who are just trying to fight for it. You mentioned the Clippers. Anthony Bennett, the former #1 pick, plays for them. I'm going, are you kidding me? That guy's still trying to grind it out and get back to the NBA. So these guys play hard. It's fun basketball. It gets up and down. It's really cool, and it's fun. Early start to the season.
Yeah, it is. It was interesting to see when we found out Stockton found out they were getting that team, just because again we know with the Bighorns, it didn't really feel like it was Sacramento's team in a sense to where one, it was in a different state, and two, that drive from Sacramento to Reno is not a drive you can do essentially after work. Where I think, in Stockton, it can be a game where, you live in Sacramento, maybe the Kings aren't on TV tonight. You may want to make the drive down I-5 or 99 to go down and, see that Stockton team. So it definitely brings the two teams in the cities closer together because it's a lot more accessible. And I think that's something that you're really going to find with that team. It's going to be a lot more fun for the fan base. I think they're going to do a really good job drawing fans because, like you said, sports is a great unifier. And if you can see some of these guys like, even a Quinn Cook for the Warriors or other guys like you said on the Lakers teams or the Clippers teams or wherever, if you can kind of see these guys before they get big, you have a different level of a connection to them because you kind of feel like you were there in the beginning, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm looking forward to. And honestly, the biggest challenge for me has just been like learning all the guys. It's just great. You can watch an NBA game. I'm a big NBA fan, so I'll watch any game. I know all the players. You get some of these G League guys. You're like, who are these guys? So it's getting used to those guys. But it's been fun, man. I mean, honestly, I'm having a blast doing the games.
So I want to transition off basketball momentarily, but we'll bring it back here. One of the things that I connected with you and I met you briefly during the tournament was our love of pro wrestling. You're a big pro wrestling fan. I've grown up in it. This is generally what this podcast is about. How did you find pro wrestling? Is it the same way as a Kings fan where you found it as a kid, or what were some of your earliest memories?
It's crazy because, my mom was into it. I guess I was just around it as a really young kid. So, I grew up watching Hogan, and I love the Ultimate Warrior. Like, those were my guys, the early 90s, so much fun. And as I got older, I kept being into it, loving Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. And then, of course, everything that went down with WCW and WWF and those wars. Like, I grew up in the middle of it. It was like the most fun time to be a wrestling fan. I'll never forget being like 10 years old. And this is like when the Attitude Era was first kicking off and WCW was starting to heat up a little bit. And all of a sudden, like, kids in my elementary school were like wanting to talk to me about wrestling because forever I was like the only kid that liked wrestling at my school. It's like no one liked it. And all of a sudden everyone's interested in it. We're having wrestling parties where we're watching pay-per-views. And I don't know, I fell in love with it then. I did stop watching it for a while. I'd kind of like, follow it from afar. And then I went to an event again in like 2013 just for fun. And I kind of got sucked back in. And so now I've been, keeping up with it. And it's just, I don't know, man. There was just something about seeing these guys as a kid. You just looked up to them. They just look so incredible. They're all ripped and they do amazing things. And then seeing how it evolved over the years has been fun.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I think where, we came into it about the same age where I was a kid. Some of my earliest memories were watching Saturday Night's Main Event or, Saturday morning Superstars. And I'd get up early and do, get my Saturday morning cartoons and the WWE Superstars. But I remember watching, the Hogans and the Ultimate Warriors and the Bret Harts. And it's weird because Bret Hart at the time, around that, the early WrestleManias, he didn't come across as a big guy on screen because he was WWE at that time was such a giant dominated cast of characters. But as those guys started to fizzle out, it became more of a wrestling based product with the Bretts and the Shawns and the Owen Harts, and then it turned into the Steve Austins and the Rocks. And even with WCW, like I remember, Saturday at 3:05 was WCW Saturday night. And then I don't think it's going to be something harder, I think, as we get older to explain to a younger generation to where it wasn't how it is now, to where you could follow along with a crown jewel on, say, like social media. You can follow those results every Monday night. You had to be in front of the TV at 7:59 to catch the start of Nitro, and then you'd have to be up till 11:10 to catch the end of Raw and Nitro. And it's something that it was a really special time in television.
It was, and for me, it was strange too, because we didn't have cable growing up, man. We were poor, so my friends used to record Monday Night Raw for me during the Attitude Era, and I'd get it on Tuesday. Then same thing when SmackDown eventually came out on Thursday nights. They would record it for me and give it to me the next day. That's how I would keep up with it. And my grandma knew a guy at work who would record like all the pay-per-views and sell them on VHS for like $5. So that's how I'd watch all the pay-per-views. There's all these tapes I'd be getting from friends. I'd be recording that way. It was a kind of a fun way looking back. I'm like, man, I can't believe that's how I kind of consumed things back in the day. And you're right. Nowadays, you go on Twitter, you find out everything. You find out about rumors. It's so easy. I mean, the dirt sheets, there's so much stuff out there. I mean, it's changed so much. I do miss the old days. I do miss when there was legit competition. And it's wild to think back. It wasn't that long of a competition. Like,
no, it really wasn't.
Think about, what is that, 96 at Bash in the Beach, and how the NWO took off. I mean, that was such a pivotal moment, and then everything that happened with WWF. And like, there was really just 3 really strong years of that before it all fell apart. And that's what's wild about it. It seems like it lasted so much longer than it did. But it was like WCW came out of the gates and NWO was so hot, but then it just got out of hand, with all the egos involved, and how they added like 27 members. It was just ridiculous. So it's really interesting to look back at those memories and go, wow, that didn't last very long.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think that's something to where I know, as we get older, we always like to romanticize the past. But even with WCW, like, it blew up around, like you said, 96 with the Bash of the Beach and Hogan. And that really started to fizzle out around like 99. And to me, that ended around the 2000 Bash of the Beach, where there was like the screw job with Hogan and Jarrett and Booker T. But we have seemingly like a lifetime of memories of Sting rappelling down from the ceiling, or, who was going to turn next on the NWO. Like, you remember when Roddy Piper debuted on Halloween Havoc, or the Ultimate Warrior came in. There was so many awful memories. Yeah, I mean, I didn't say the match was good. I just remember the debut and like those really weird promos he would cut, and the One Warrior Nation, and then like he kidnapped Brutus the Barber Beefcake that didn't look like Brutus the Barber Beefcake anymore. That whole like Disciple thing, which that was such a strange thing, because it was the same guy. But if I put those two guys next to each other, there's no way you could pick those two guys out to be the exact same people.
Yeah, you're right. And the real shame of the whole thing was, once Vince decided to buy WCW, that we didn't get a true WCW invasion storyline. And that's still one that you look back and it's like, because all those guys have their guaranteed contracts. They were going to go ahead and just sit at home. Those big names are going to sit at home. And the only guys that were going to come over were, Buff Bagwell and Sean Stasiak. And it just didn't have it. I mean, Booker T's nice, but it just didn't have that same type of feel, where it would have been just amazing had WCW, got purchased, and all of a sudden, here's Hogan and Nash and Hall coming down the aisle. And it's like, wow, they're here. This is nuts. So it's too bad that it kind of fizzled out. Even when NWO did show up, it just didn't have the same feel, and just disappointing.
Yeah, I remember when they did show up. They showed up around like No Way Out 2002 or 2003. I know it was leading into WrestleMania 18. And even, that WrestleMania 18, you take away that Hogan versus Rock, which, was a great match in itself. Like, Austin Scott Hall wasn't really what you thought it could be. And like, something just didn't seem right about those three guys anymore. I don't know if they were trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle, but having Hogan come back, and unfortunately Nash couldn't really stay healthy very well around that time. But you're absolutely right. Like, even going back and watching some of those old like Invasion pay-per-views, they seemed to take like a lot of guys from WWE who were there at the time, who had became mainstay WWE guys like the Dudleys, or even guys like Austin, and they would turn them to WCW, and it just kind of took away, I think what that invasion could have and should have been, but that pay-per-view in itself was still one of their most profitable. It seemed something was missing there, that they just couldn't really put it all together.
You're right. It was just kind of a crappy way to end that whole run between WCW and WWF.
Yeah, there were a lot of guys and as I've gotten older and with the advent of the network, like I have a deeper appreciation for like the Lance Storms and the Steven Regals as far as what they did to
dude, as a kid, I hated those guys. Like, honestly, those were tune-out matches. Those were like, oh, can we just get NWO back on the screen? And nowadays, you're like, man, you really grow to appreciate what those guys were able to accomplish.
Yeah, Regal's one for me to where I remember watching them as a kid, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really see it. Like, it just kind of seems vanilla. It seems boring. Like, he's another guy from England. And then as you get older, and I'm watching him back, and I'm like, those facial expressions, like, he tells such a good story with those facials, or the way that he has good matches with just about anybody, and how Lance Storm was sort of the WWE and WCW measuring stick. Like, they would have all the new guys go through the Storms and the Regals to sort of test their mettle. But, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, I was like, oh, these guys never win. And then you kind of get a different appreciation for what they needed to be in order to be successful. They were your typical role players.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Regal, you talk about a guy who did his job. There are certain guys growing up as a kid that I just hated. And I realized, because they were heels and you were supposed to hate them. Like, Regal was that. Like, there's like, you just looked at him, you did not like him, right? Like, that's how you felt about him. He was doing his job and he did it well.
Yeah, Regal was one of those guys that, like, I didn't necessarily understand what he was doing. I just knew that, like, he always seemed to get out of the way of getting hurt. And as a kid, that would infuriate me. I'm like, why is this guy being such a coward? And then you watch as an adult and it's like, oh, okay, like, he's trying to get the people and the fans in the stands riled up. And now it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the big things that's been coming out of WWE, and I know I'm a little bit late on the news there, was the unfortunate and really saddening news about Roman Reigns dealing with leukemia again. That was one that Roman, I've been a big fan of Roman. I know it's sort of popular as adults not to like Roman I think that's just the culture we're in now with wrestling. I'm a big fan of him. I don't think he's really had many bad matches. I think he's in an era right now to where no one really stands out promo-wise. Everything just kind of feels scripted, which I understand the bigger picture. But what was sort of your initial reaction to either reading or hearing about, Roman Reigns unfortunately having to step away with leukemia?
Man, that was just shocking, It's just not something you expect to hear, especially on Monday Night Raw. When you turn on the show, you see Reigns coming out and it has a different tone. The one thing I'd say about all that is I think the announcers have to get a better heads up on that. Not so much like, hey, here's what he's going to say, but the way the announcing team kind of reacted to him coming out was as if they didn't know anything about the fact that he had like this big announcement, like this huge announcement. They were kind of hyping up the big match. And it's like, well, it doesn't make much sense, And then they're kind of floored once Roman Reigns makes that announcement. Dude, I mean, it's obviously just a sad story, and you just hope that he fights through it and battles his way back. I found it interesting, the crowd reaction. Like, all these people hate him and boo him and every chance they get, but they turned, in his favor during a very serious moment, which was cool in a way, but at the same time, I'm like, really? The guy had to like get leukemia for you to like appreciate him? Like,
yes,
you mentioned it. He puts on great matches, and I get it. Like, I think fans' problems are more about Vince than it is about Roman Reigns and the constant push. Dude, when Roman was first in the Shield, everybody loved Roman Reigns. It wasn't until later that they started to hate him, when they felt like he was getting forced, and everything that happened at the Royal Rumble when Daniel Bryan didn't win it. It wasn't never about Roman. And it's just interesting to me. My first reaction was like, wow, it took him announcing that he has to take a leave of absence about leukemia for you guys to show him respect.
Yeah, it was really interesting because that was sort of the vibe that I had gotten to where he walked down to the aisle, and you kind of had that normal sort of, mixed crowd reaction that Roman would get. And then all of a sudden he announces he has this, career-threatening, life-threatening disease. And it just felt like there was one big guilt trip that went over the crowd. And they're like, oh, like this whole time, this is actually a human being. Like, this guy's name is really like, his name's Joe. It's not Roman, and like
Right.
maybe we shouldn't have been booing him this whole time. Like, how awful are we? And I liked him when he was in the Shield. Like, I thought that faction was incredible, just because I remember when it debuted, everyone was like, "Oh my God, you've got to look at this long-haired guy who kind of looks like he looks like Aquaman or Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, this guy's pretty cool," because I'd heard of Dean Ambrose, I'd heard of Seth Rollins for following the indies here and there, but I'd never really heard of Roman Reigns, and everyone was hyping the guy up. And then to your point, like as soon as the Shield sort of breaks up and he's obviously the guy, all the fans are just going to boo him for that. And I think I'm of the opinion, I think that has a lot to do with what happened before Roman was the guy with John Cena, to where Cena was the guy for, was pretty much the guy for WrestleMania 20 to WrestleMania 30.
Right.
But as long as they were getting any sort of crowd reaction, it was essentially a win. And I think with Roman, I think with the WWE now, they think as long as our top guy, because WWE has always been a top guy territory, then it funnels down. As long as our top guy is getting some kind of reaction, it's a win, because Cena got a polarizing reaction and it was a win. But I was a fan. Like, I think he got dealt a tough hand with the feud with Brock, just because they missed on so many opportunities to have good matches and have logical storylines. But I thought he was finding his voice on the microphone, and just to have him sort of have that pulled away from him and see so much of his growth sort of be halted was really tough to watch.
Yeah, I agree, man. So hopefully it comes back strong. I think, look, when I look at the product overall, the bigger issue I have is like, I'm sorry, Undertaker and Kane should not be wrestling anymore.
Couldn't agree more.
I loved them back in the heyday, 20 years ago when they were in the heyday, I would say. And you're bringing them back. It's just not the same. Kane, I'm sorry, Kane's not intimidating to me anymore, because we've seen him as corporate Kane. He's old now. He's a freaking mayor of Knoxville, okay? Yeah. He's not the same guy, right? There's no mysteriousness about him. The Undertaker is not the same dude. I love Triple H. I love the game. I don't mind him wrestling as much. But then you like reform DX, and I don't even like calling it DX, because to me that's not DX. And I know everyone loves Shawn Michaels. HBK was my guy growing up too. But DX, to me, the real DX was post Shawn Michaels, and that was with Triple H, China, X-Pac, the New Age Outlaws. To me, that was DX. DX isn't the guys that come out with glow sticks and throw them out into the crowd. It became too cheesy to me. And that's one thing where WWE, like with the last card, I'm just like, why? Like, why are we bringing back DX? Were people clamoring for DX to come back and reunite? At some point, you got to start moving on from those guys, because you can't hold on to them forever. You really can't. And I'm not sure they're building up their current guys enough to have that same impact. Like, 20 years from now, are they going to be able to bring back Seth Rollins? Have they built him up enough to do something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the ones where that was really evident for me, at least, was when WrestleMania 31 hit. It was in our backyard of Santa Clara at Levi Stadium, and that was one of the bigger ones that really frustrated me as a fan, because I'm a big fan of Bray Wyatt. I think he's been dealt one of the tougher hands of this generation, as far as like this era of wrestling. And I say this generation, I mean like WrestleMania 30 to now. And the guy has everything you need. He's different, especially in an era where everything kind of feels so cookie cutter. It feels so overproduced.
Yeah.
Which I understand. Like, I understand you can't have the Attitude Era and also get on ESPN and do Connor's Cure. I get the trade-off there, but Bray felt different. His promos felt different. His delivery felt different. His walk to the ring felt different. And, the year after Undertaker lost the streak to Brock, to not have the Undertaker show up on TV all year and have Bray constantly calling this guy out, and then all of a sudden Undertaker beats him in like a 15-minute match, what you're telling your paying customer, who pays to go to your Super Bowl every year, is that this one guy who is obviously past his prime, who had to be carried out of the Superdome in an ambulance due to a concussion, can just waltz back in and beat one of the guys that now you need to believe in, 3 or 4 months after WrestleMania 31. I think that was one that for me, I was like, okay, like I was an Undertaker fan. I think the streak of like WrestleMania 23 to WrestleMania 29 were his best matches at WrestleMania. I actually think he's had more bad matches at Mania than he has good.
Yeah.
But he had a really good streak going with like the Edge and the two that he had with Shawn and the two that he had with Triple H. But I just thought it was getting to the point, and we see this a lot in sports fans, like this Crown Jewel card reminded me of seeing like Shaquille O'Neal on the Celtics or Mitch Richmond on the Lakers. Like it just didn't feel right. And as a fan who grew up loving, Mitch Richmond or loving Shaq, like you don't want to watch those guys go out that way because you feel like it just does more damage to their legacy than anything. But, in wrestling, as it's been shown, nothing's really sacred when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I'm interested in why they feel why it's necessary to do that. Do they truly get a spike in viewership on the network when they bust out a DX against the Brothers of Destruction? For me, again, I go way back with this, man, and I loved all those guys, but it's not the same. It's just not. It's like you mentioned. It's seeing Shaq with the Celtics, or it just doesn't have the same feel. Like I want to see these guys in their prime, and it'd be one thing if the roster wasn't deep enough, but I think WWE has a ton of talent, and they've had a ton of talent over the years. They've lost a ton of talent over the years, and you've seen that, of course, with Cody Rhodes, what he's been able to accomplish as a marquee name now on his own without WWE, as he was just stuck in the Stardust phase. And look at what he's doing now, and I guarantee you they wish they had someone like him, but I just don't feel they do enough. And that's what I'm interested to see as we progress here over the next few years. Will WWE ever get competition again?
I think it's tough. I think with the Cody Rhodes thing, I think that was one thing that was really interesting to me, because what he did with All In was something that I think wrestling in North America has struggled with since WCW folded, where there really wasn't anything from a mainstream competition that would get viewers away from WWE in North America. Obviously with New Japan and Progress and Lucha Underground and stuff like that, or Lucha Libre, there's always different options. And I think in 2018 there's more options at the buffet line and there's more accessibility, whereas in the 90s, like, you really had to search for ECW tapes, or you really had to search for Japanese tapes. But I think one thing that Cody has going for him is that I think he's forcing WWE to put on a better product. I don't think it's going to be competition the way that WCW was. I don't think it's going to force WCW to change their programming the way ECW did. But I think that show, WrestleMania weekend at Madison Square Garden, the Ring of Honor and New Japan are going to run. I think my hope is, and I think this would give me the kind of hope as far as to know that the landscape is changing, to where if it forces WWE to put on a better product. Like, I don't think anyone's going to do what Eric Bischoff did, to where they almost bankrupt WWE. But I just hope that if nothing else, the independent wrestling scene is going to force WWE to take a little bit more chances and try to put on a better product. If they can get that, then I think it's a win.
Yeah, and they have to, especially with the move to Fox coming up here next year, with SmackDown going to network television. They can't just keep doing the same stuff. They got to push it, and hopefully that these other organizations are able to push them in a good direction.
Absolutely. So I want to go back to the Sacramento Kings here a little bit. I know they have a game coming up soon against the Toronto Raptors, but as a wrestling fan, I was there for De'Aaron Fox's first game in Sacramento. Is he the top babyface for the Sacramento Kings right now? Because he got a huge pop that first game, and to me, it feels like he's the number one babyface in Sacramento right now.
That's a good one. I would say yes. He's probably the top babyface in Sacramento, and I think that could change over time. But the way he's playing, he's going to be the top babyface. Who else would be a good babyface? I think Harry Giles is definitely a babyface. Obviously, if he was playing more and playing better, it would be even more. But I'm telling you, if Harry Giles does figure it out, I think he surpasses De'Aaron Fox as a top babyface on the roster.
Yeah, he is. If nothing else, right now the team is funner to watch than it's been in a while. Like, I'm really excited to watch them play every night. Like, I don't think it's to be quite honest, I don't think it's the 3-game road trip that they had, and they went through the Florida and they went through Atlanta. I think it's a combination of that and what they had against Milwaukee. But if nothing else, the team feels kind of fun to watch. It feels like you're watching like a fresh crop of exciting talent that hopefully they can develop some things into with
Yeah.
Fox being the main guy.
I'm interested. This stretch coming up's tough. When you look
Yes.
at the homestand, then you got the Raptors, Lakers, Spurs, and T-Wolves on it. Then you hit the road. You got Memphis and Houston. I think you also have Utah a couple of times this month and then Golden State. So you got some tough games coming up. But if they can get to the end of November for that game against the Clippers, which is on TNT, if they can get that to a 10-10 at that point, 500 mark after 20 games, everyone would take that. I'm being realistic. I am living in the moment. There's a lot of fans out there talking, they're talking about playoffs. Playoffs? I mean, no.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even talk about 500 right now. All I'm looking for this year is improvement from the young guys. Is De'Aaron Fox better this year? So far, the answer is yes. Buddy Hield, yes. Marvin Bagley, better than a lot of people thought, who thought he was going to be like the worst guy ever. So, to me, that's what it's all about. The fact is they're going to go in a funk. And that's because some of these guys who are shooting the ball at such a high level, like Buddy Hield and Bjelica, they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. Bjelica is not going to shoot 58% from three-point land because that's unheard of. So, they're going to dip a little bit, and that's okay. That's the thing that I think Kings fans need to just, hey, put away the panic button, enjoy the ups and the downs here because you're going to have some downs coming up here. But it doesn't mean that, oh, no, they're taking step backs. No, it means that they're a young team and they're going to score a lot of points, and sometimes they're going to give up like 140-plus points like they did to Milwaukee and New Orleans. Like, it's going to happen. So just be patient with it. Look for the growth. And hopefully, they surprise everyone. And if they win 35 games this year, that surprises everybody in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I was kind of saying in the same boat with you there. Like, for me, I like to have fun with it. Like, I had fun watching them, win in Miami, win in Atlanta, win in Orlando. Like, because those to me are games that I don't think they would have won either last year or 2 years. And I'm glad they're going with the full compilation of the young guys. And my thing is, like, do I think they're going to sniff the playoffs? Realistically, no. But if nothing else, I'm going to have fun watching my childhood basketball team. If I remember stomping my feet to Randy Brown and getting as many of those Rattle Seattle placards as I could back in the day. And if nothing else, like, I just want to be able to have fun from 7:30 to 10 o'clock watching them play ball. And if you give me that with the amount of cap space they're going to have walking into the offseason, my whole goal with this season is to at least look like an attractive free agency destination to a guy that could help propel them over the top. If we can get that, whether we win 30 games, 35 games, like, there's going to be games where they look like a bunch of kids in their 20s.
Yeah.
Because that's what they are. But if they're fun to watch, they're a team you can essentially be proud of watching. If you're going to give me that 82 games a year, I'm happy. I'm good with that. I'm fine with that as a fan of the team because it hasn't always been that way. We've struggled through, being essentially a point guard rehab facility with the Ty Lawsons and the Rondos. And, now we finally have a top babyface point guard. We have some stuff to build around. If you're going to give me hope walking into next year, I'm okay with that.
That's what it's all about. And that's what I'm trying to say is, like, enjoy it a little bit. I just, and try not to live in this social media bubble like most of us do. But, like, I see the fans, I saw the overreaction to when the Kings were winning too much at the end of the year. My stance was, guys, it's a lottery, right? They could move up. Yeah. Oh, what do you know? They moved up. Then I saw the reaction when they didn't draft Luka and, Bagley had a couple of so-so games in the summer league. He looked bad in a couple of them, and it was like, oh, the world is ending. It's like, dude, why does everything have to be such a rush to judgment? Why does everything have to be black or white? Like, look, Luka can end up being like a really great player, and he's shown some nice things this year. But if Luka's great, it doesn't mean Bagley can't be, right? Yeah. And same goes for the other guys in the draft. Like, there could be multiple. This looks like it's going to be a damn good draft when we look back on it. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So, like, just be patient here. And if the team goes in a little bit of a funk here, don't start questioning things and wondering what's happening. No, let's see how they handle the adversity. Let's see what happens when they lose 4 in a row. Can they bounce back? Can De'Aaron get things going again? And what can Buddy do? And how does Bogdanovic fit into all of this when he returns? Like, those are the things you have to realize. I don't think we're going to get a sense as to what this team really is in terms of are they really good or not until about 25, 30 games into the season. That's to me when you can really take a look and say, yeah, this team they might push for 500, or oh, this team, we'll see. Maybe they can make the 8th seed. We're not going to know that for a little while.
Yeah, and the way that I've looked at it is, if the team's fun, then that's a win for Sacramento, because it hasn't, Golden One to me, it just doesn't feel like Arco yet, because if it's fun basketball, then it's a win. I think the past couple of years, it hasn't always been fun to watch a team that is going through the transition or has been putting out, rolling out the George Hills or the Lawsons or the Rondos. And those guys are great players, but it now kind of feels like this is the start of the groundswell of something. Like there's enough young guys to where there has to be talent. And I agree with you. Everything nowadays, it does feel like it's black and white. Like had we drafted Luka, then there's a whole bunch of screaming fans being like, oh my God, you've got to take Bagley. And then if you take Bagley, there's a whole bunch of screaming fans that are being like, oh my God, I'm going to overreact to this first game that Luka has. It's like, just allow things the opportunity to play themselves out. And not only that, have fun while they're playing themselves out. Like even during that 3-game winning streak, like I don't expect them to make the playoffs. I don't expect them to win 40 games, but it felt kind of good to watch my favorite basketball team play well for 3 games. And they played good in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's a top flight team, but just to enjoy that and to feel good about it, I think is something that we're getting the start of, and that excites me.
I agree. Like if you're not going to be a good team or a team that's like young, at least be fun to watch. Yeah. And last year they were not fun to watch, right? Like they just, it was lowest scoring team in the league at like 98 points per game. Their pace is near the bottom. And this year, De'Aaron's pushing the tempo like crazy. Willie Cauley-Stein's doing some really nice things. Bielitsa's open up the floor for the guys. Buddy's playing better. There's encouraging signs that it's headed in a positive direction.
So I want to wrap this up on one thing, because I know I've got to get to work. I know you got a lot going on tonight as well. What was the last thing you watched on WWE Network?
Oh, my goodness. That's a good question. It's been a while since I turned on the network, to be honest. I go through phases. I feel like because I feel like WWE goes through phases where they, after like Mania, they kind of like, well, we're going to go ahead and mail it in. And so like I start to mail it in, or after SummerSlam, they start mailing it in. So I kind of do the same. So it's been a long time. I can't even remember. But, dude, I like to go back and watch old stuff. Like one of my favorite matches growing up as a kid, I don't know why, it just sticks with me, was the Crybaby match with 1, 2, 3 Kid and Razor Ramon. Where
that was on Raw. No, it was on In Your House.
It was In Your House 6.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
And I'll just never. I don't know why I was so intrigued, because I just hated the 1, 2, 3 Kid so much at that time. Like again, a guy doing his job, and Razor put the diaper on him. It was awesome. I probably watched the 1996 WrestleMania like 100 times as a kid. I'll still turn it on every once in a while because that Iron Man match between Shawn and Brett was just amazing.
I met Brett in Newark. There's an independent wrestling promotion out here called Big Time Wrestling. I met him twice. He is like my favorite wrestler of all time. I met him when I was 31. I met him when I was 24. Both times I could not put a sentence together for the life of me. I forgot how to speak both times. And I got his autograph. I got pictures with him, but I couldn't put a sentence together for the life of me.
Dude, I wanted to be the kid so bad that was sitting ringside and get the glasses. Like, I wanted them so bad. I did have those glasses as a kid, but I wanted to be the kid that got them on TV.
I wanted to be the kid in the commercial that's like, Brett! And then like the storybook thing where he turns around and he sees him. Yeah, it never quite worked though.
No, but man, he was the best.
Absolutely. So again, so Deuce and Mo's coming back. You are the voice of the Stockton Kings. Where can people check out everything that you're doing media-wise?
I would say go to deuceandmo.com. I mean, my goal in life, I mentioned this when we taped our return podcast, I just want to be versatile in everything. Like, to me, Joe Rogan's a great example. And not even because of the podcast thing. Joe Rogan does a podcast. He's a great comedian. He's a UFC commentator. The guy, like, does it all. That's my goal in life. So, like, hey, I'm doing play-by-play today? Sure, I'm doing play-by-play. But I'm going to host a podcast that talks about everything. I'm going to talk about sports. We're going to have fun. We're going to talk about life, wrestling. I've done Good Day Sacramento where I talk to random people about their businesses and dressed as a ballerina. I mean, I did a lot of stupid stuff. that's my goal in life, to do a lot of fun stuff. So that's what I'm trying to do. To keep track of all that, just go to deuceandmo.com and hit us up on Twitter at Deuce Mason. Check out the Deuce and Mo podcast. I encourage you guys to check it out if you're into sports. And yeah, that's about it.
Cool, man. So you guys can check out all 86 episodes of this podcast at gullyblanchard.podbean.com. You can also check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you get podcasts by searching Gully Blanchard. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, GULLYBLANCHARD. Deuce, this was a pleasure. Something I've been wanting to do for a while, man. So thank you very much for making the time. And I'll see you this weekend at the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure to say hi. I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for making it work out. Let's do it again soon, man.
Sounds good. Until then, guys, we'll be back next week. Have a good weekend.